This meeting will be conducted remotely over Zoom. Attendance by board commission members will be remote, and remote attendance shall count towards quorum. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded on ECAT. To use Zoom, you will need to use the link on the agenda or download the Zoom application at www.zoom.us and create an account or use one of the call-in numbers listed on the agenda. You will need the webinar ID to join by phone only. While conducting meetings remotely, we'll endeavor to keep meeting operations as close to our standard procedures as possible. Our use of this platform will necessitate some additional meeting protocols. While the board members or commissioners and applicants will be on video and audio, public participants will join the webinar as attendee, meaning they are muted and with no video feed from them. During the public testimony portion of the meeting, members of the public can be recognized by using the raise hand function found under participants from Zoom or make a request with the Q&A function. If you're joining only by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. If an applicant wishes to display materials, please make the request to the chair and the email materials to board staff for sharing on screen. Starting testimony, please state your name and address for the record. There's a markup function in Zoom which will allow you to call out specific areas of presentation materials. As in any public meeting, indecent behavior will not be tolerated, and anyone who abuses use of the meeting platform will be terminated from the meeting. Business will be handled at the times indicated on the agenda. Business not conducted in the allotted time will be tabled to the end of the meeting to allow for timely logins and remote attendance. Board members are asked to announce themselves when making a motion in seconds, so it'll be clear to the audience and minute takers who make motions. All votes will be by roll call. When all business indicated on the agenda has been completed, the members will vote to adjourn the meeting, signaling the end of the meeting and the termination of the ECAT recording. All participants will be disconnected from the webinar at that time. Applicants will join the webinar as an attendee and promoted to panelist at their agenda item. Applicants will then be able to share their screens and present their materials. As much as possible, presentation materials should be provided beforehand so that materials can be included in the public record. Individual board chairs and staff may wish to keep screen sharing to their computer. Applicants are encouraged to speak with staff prior to the meeting on how material will be presented. All right. Kathy, are there any other members of the public that we know of right now?
No one else.
Okay. All right. So we'll start for approval of the meeting minutes. Those are the meeting minutes of February 13th, 2024. Did anyone have any questions, comments, concerns about the meeting minutes? Seeing none. The only thing I think, Kathy, on page 3, under Eastern Early Elementary School project update, that was the final COO, certificate of occupancy. So that's what that should be. I think I had a question on that. Anyone else? Any questions, concerns, comments? All right. Seeing none, do I have a motion to accept those meeting minutes?
So moved, Stebbins.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second, Bruce.
All right. We'll go with Jason on that one.
Sorry for my audio difficulties there.
All right. All right, so we'll have a roll call vote. I am a yes. I don't see Ken. Jamie?
Yes.
Lauren?
Yes.
Okay, Dan?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
And Jason?
Yes.
All right. So the meeting minutes are approved. All right. So just briefly, as far as the other topics before we get into the public safety, well, Dave Field isn't available, so we will be tabling the water treatment facility project update. He can update us at our next meeting on that, because I think he's the only one who would have that info. Walter, I don't know if you just wanted to give us a quick rundown of any changes or anything about the
Yep. Yep, really nothing's changed. We are working towards that April vacation. We have a lot of really button-up work to wrap up. We did have a good meeting last week where some items that have kind of been falling through the cracks were brought to the team's attention so that we could get on them. Contractor's been very responsive to all of the emails, thanks to Chris Urbano for heading that up on PMA's end, but thanks to the district for making us or keeping us in the loop on those items. So you should see some, no, maybe not see them, but they are going to be taken care of over the next few weeks, and then specifically anything that needs to get taken care of while students aren't in the building, looking to schedule that for the April break. And then hopefully once that April break wraps up, or near the end of the April break, walk with the building commissioner to receive that final C of O. And we're on that temporary C of O, which he's been working with the contractor on. But once that's wrapped up, the last couple things are the submission for lead, which needs to go in. GC's been had some turnover on their end, so they're a little bit behind getting some documentation over to the lead team. But once that gets wrapped up, that submission will go in, and then once we start having all the final documentation for the closeout package to MSBA, we will start collecting signatures for some documents and getting those over to the MSBA as well for that final closeout package.
All right. Did anyone have any questions, comments, concerns about the early elementary school project? All right. Not seeing any. Thank you for that update, Walter.
Yep.
And why don't we move right along to over to your presentation for the
Sure.
Public Safety and Public Works project.
Absolutely. So we've been plugging right along. So tonight we'll go over schedule update. Really nothing's changed. Kate, and then we're going to turn it over to the KBA team for DD phase work plan status update, go over building layouts, updates on focus group meetings, geotech, geoenvironmental, and then radio tower updates, and then a quick design update as well, and then any questions or comments. So we have the 524 Depot Street portion of the project and the 327 Main, which is the fire substation. We have these tied out. I think last meeting we didn't have these mapped out to be the same completion date. So at this point, they're mapped out to be that same completion date for the DD package. At that DD package, everyone knows on this committee, we will be discussing whether or not to break these into two separate packages or carry them as one. PMA has been initially in contact with a few of the larger general contractors who all noted that they would be much more interested in the combined package. And they do feel that there would be some opportunities for some, I don't want to say bid savings, but that was hopefully what it would result in. But for some economy of scale in the bidding process if they were lumped together. We will ask the estimators to take a look at that and see if they have a price for the two options. But that's something we'll be looking at with this group during that value management exercise in May. Greg, if you want to take it from here on next steps and kind of run into detailed design, and just let me know when you want to change over any slides.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate it, Walter. So the process is going on as Walter described. We're continuing to meet with both user groups and focus groups. We've completed the next round of focus group meetings, which include a number of different aspects of the project. And then the user group meetings are really to meet with the department. Each department has kind of pulled in a number of staff members interested in the project or with specific expertise in one particular area to advise on the progress of the documents, making sure we're incorporating everything that needs to be in there for them to have, an adequate working space and that we don't miss anything that's needed. As we go through that, this is an iterative process, right? So I wouldn't say that design continues to change, right? But the design does continue to evolve a little bit and get refined throughout the process. That happens through this stage of design, and ultimately, it does happen a little bit through the construction document phase, which is the next phase of design, so that by the time we reach that bid set, we're pretty much finalized and have everything in there that we know about and need to include. So we're on track for all of those items. There's, I'd say, Walter, 30 or so work plan items that we're tracking. In the background, internally, we have another 200 or so internal checkpoints for us, working through individual deliverables to work through to get our packages done, and we're well on the way for that. The estimate goes out, the 15th of next month, the estimator, and they have a couple weeks to do the estimate and come back. So really, that's our next big target, is making sure that we've achieved documents to be able to estimate the project and include all of the project scope in that estimate, and then ultimately come back and make some decisions with this group about potential VE or anything that has to happen to get the project within budget. Now that we have a little bit more refined documents, and we're a little bit closer and have more information on what the current bidding climate is. So I think all signs are pointing to things going as we expected. But this is a kind of a point where we have some reality check and make sure we are on track to deliver this project on budget. So you see the dates here ahead of you. We're on track for all of those, and we'll jump into kind of an update about kind of what we've done, where we've been, and how that kind of translates into the project documents. So validate the program, right? We've gone through and validated all the programs, and public safety, particularly as we work through particular spaces, right? Those tend to flux a little bit, but basically stay on target with the total program. If we're tightening up one space, we're usually doing that because we need to pull a little bit more space into another space. There's a little bit of give and take in that process, but generally we are about where we were in programming all the way back in schematic design. We are going through the design. So as I said, number of meetings, we meet weekly with the departments, making sure that we're on track, going through revisions that they've asked for to make usually flow and work zones work, in line with how their operations are. And we've done that. DPW particularly has done a number of building tours to other departments, given the nature of their work and kind of how large some of the equipment is, to see other equipment and things like that. So that's been ongoing. We've hit almost everything in our weekly design meetings. There are a couple things left to hit that are really down to pretty specific details. Accreditation standards for police, we want to make sure we go through and back check those all along the way. That happens at each step of the process. Working through some details for emergency operations. When the community room turns into the emergency operations center, we want to make sure not only the fire department, who runs the EOC, usually has what they need, but the public works and police also have what they need, that the communications are tied in with that, and that we have all of the broadcasting and radio tied in. So minor details, that stuff comes kind of a little bit toward the end of this phase and a little bit more towards CDs, but we want to make sure that the bulk of the scope is included. We have a good idea what's needed in there, so that the estimates accurately reflect what the scope is. So, and we're really into the document, right, phase of this part. So we're working on specifications and, rough form, and getting the contract document set up to speed to document all the things we've been working on in the design phase. And that's what we'll do, over roughly the next month, so that when we go out to the estimator, they have a good solid set to estimate from. And I'd say we're well on the way to that. Yep, jump to the next slide, Walter. So you can see we've done all of those things. We do have a couple of focus group meetings that did extend a little bit. So we've extended those meetings out. We were originally ending about the first of this month. A couple meetings we weren't able to meet with. A couple things we're still refining. So we're right about ready to wrap up with police and fire. I think DPW is in relatively good shape. That date may have pushed a little bit beyond 3-4, but I think we're in relatively good shape, and all of the focus group meetings have been completed. Jump on to the next one.
And Greg, I just wanted to jump and ask real quick, were there any major changes or takeaways from any of those focus groups? Anything, any way you pivoted, or pretty much still on the same track?
I'd say when we get to the design update, we'll probably highlight a couple of those things, Andy. There weren't any real big outliers. I would say that there was some discussion in sustainability about particular items in the building, mostly clarification. I think you were part of that one. Exterior design, we proposed a couple different things that didn't have a great reaction. So we've pulled back and tweaked a couple things that we'll present tonight. Interior design, I think there was a lot of interest in that, and good reactions to specific things and a lot of good information gained. Much of the focus groups aligned with a lot of what we've heard before. So I wouldn't say there are vast changes compared to what this group has seen before, but there are some specifics that we were able to work through, particularly around specific items that are needed and things like that, that Walter, I think, will be presenting at the next building committee around proprietary items and specifications. I think they're relatively minor in nature in this case, but those things did come up, Andy. So I think were helpful meetings to have, informative for the design team, and I hope that they were informative and helpful for the town and the staff. So I'll just jump to kind of our detailed design update. So geotechnical report, we have in the Depot Street report, and what we have pretty much reflects what we had at schematic design, the initial phase of the processing. So as we know, Easton's notorious for having not great dirt and a lot of ledge. So in this case, we didn't find a lot of ledge, so that's good. But we do have some soils that we have to manage either on-site or off-site and replace with more suitable soils to bear a building on. So there's about a 2 to 4 foot wedge of soil below the buildings that has to come out and be replaced with structural fill. We'll work through that with all of the site grading and all the other things, particularly around this site, to make that happen. That was excuse me, that was accounted for at the schematic design phase, so that is in the project budget. I think we carried about 5 foot of replacement, and as you average it out over the 2 buildings, that's about what we need. So those things are anticipated, but it's another round. You can see how many all the red dots are the borings we did, how many borings we did and test pits we did to do that and make sure it's compliant. The foundations resulted in a standard foundation design, so that's a good sign. No ground improvements are needed. That's also a good sign. So things are aligning with what our initial expectations are, and that's great news.
Greg, this is all clean dirt, right?
Yes,
it's not it'll go to a less than RSC1 facility, right?
Yeah, and honestly, Dan, we're trying to manage it on site as much as possible.
I know we always do.
Right, like we don't want to export dirt if we don't have to. It's about a 30,000 cubic yard import.
Okay.
20 to 30,000 cubic yard import to raise the buildings right. And so what we're trying to do is work the grading around, work with the water table and shape the grade, particularly at DPW. We need kind of big flat areas at DPW, and use some of those soils if we can, even if they're amended, to do the grading so we don't have to do an export. But yes, if we were to export, I would expect it to be less than RCS1, with limited caveats to that around the areas of trash removal that we may ping on something that kicks us into RS1 that we've kind of accounted for separately. So kind of outside of the soil management, right? We've accounted for trash removal. Once we remove that, then we would, that stuff is going to take a little bit of dirt with it. It'll then be checked. But the LSP has been out. We've done soil sampling. Everything's come back clean so far. So positive signs. It's just I want to be specific and clear about what we've tested and what we expect to need to dispose.
Okay.
And we'll jump over to Main Street. So similar conditions, less than the removal we needed on Depot Street, but still a little bit of like forest mat and subsurface material that we need to remove. Again, much smaller footprint, so less of an impact. That's there. The recommendations are still applicable from the original report. So basically, again, same thing, standard foundations, all normal stuff. A little bit of export most likely down on this site because we just have less room to kind of lose the topsoil and stuff on. But again, it's generally topsoil and forest mat material, so relatively easy to dispose of. And we'll jump onto geothermal because those are kind of intertwined a little bit. So geothermal, we have the report from Depot Street, but the report, the connectivity test is just being rerun one more time because we did have a small area of abnormalities. Essentially, what we believe happened was the generator shut off for a short period of time, but the results aren't expected to change. So the borehole hit ledge at about 60 feet. The ground temperature ranged between about 53 and 54 degrees. And the thermal conductivity is about 2 BTUs per foot of well. So you can lose 2 BTUs or gain 2 BTUs by foot of well, which is relatively high. So that's a really good sign. You would expect somewhere in the mid ones to 1 and 3/4, and we're at 2. That's primarily due to the high water yield. So there's a high water yield, so water is moving through the site below the surface at a fairly high rate, which helps with the conductivity test, right? You're moving the heat away from the well at a more rapid rate than being stagnant. So that's a good sign, and it will ultimately result in less wells for the design. We expect that Main Street will be relatively close to that. We have some initial data, but we don't have the final report yet from the driller, so we're waiting on that. But we expect them to be really close in there. We had a little bit more water yield on that one, so it may be slightly better, slightly less. But the ground conditions are essentially the same. We hit ledge a little bit quicker there, so those are all good signs. And again, Main Street's much smaller, less of an impact there. So all signs point to good news. So we'll jump into the design update. So a few things that are driving our design update, and we'll everybody on this call remembers the project scope. So 2 sites, and we'll jump right into Main Street. So one of the updates we had originally was in the schematic design, we were entering into the building from the front of the building or the Depot Street side of the building. And as we worked through that, right, we were publicly parking along the western side, so kind of the left side of the building, and then really kind of coming a long way around the building to enter into essentially the middle of the front. And as we worked through that, it was a pretty long walk. The community room kind of pushed out to that western side, and we had to go a long way around that community room to then, kind of come back to the community room for the majority of the public. So we took another look at that. And Andy, I think, on the exterior design meeting, this was one of the things that came up and what we were working towards. And, we'll jump to the next picture and you can kind of see it a little bit more in 3D, right? So originally we were entering out the front, but all the parking kind of wrapped back around the building. So we wanted to see if there was an opportunity to bring the entry closer to the public parking while still creating that kind of nice face on Depot Street, simplifying the geometry a little bit, simplifying the materials a little bit from schematic design, and just kind of cleaning up a few things with circulation and the entry. And Walter, we'll just jump to the next one if you could. So you can see here what results in the floor plan, right? When we originally had the community room, kind of where the big black arrow is for entry, we pull that around and just kind of move things around. The other 2 wings of the building didn't change much, right? Police and fire layouts stayed relatively the same. Things have pushed and pulled a little bit, but no kind of major shifts. So this allows entry in off the public parking. It allows the community room to take a more prominent presence on Depot Street, and it's just a little cleaner as you circulate through the building. Again, these floor plans will change a little bit over time as we pull things around, tweak the lobby a little bit, really to get the interior design finished. But this creates a better sense of entry particularly from public parking, and we don't lose the presence on Depot Street. So Walter, we'll just jump upstairs for this. So again, 2-story lobby like we had before, stair up, police and fire admin, on, flanking the sides, shared areas in the back, fire mezzanine all the way to the left of the screen, separated by the apparatus bay, right? So again, same basic form. We're just moving things around slightly to make the, experience as you're entering the building from particularly public parking a little bit more conducive to what we're looking for. And we'll just jump forward again, Walter. And so one of the reasons why we had the entry facing Depot Street originally was because we were a little bit afraid of what the experience was with entry would be, and whether we would lose the entry as we brought it around the corner and address the public parking. But as you can see, we don't do that, right? We're able to still keep a strong presence on Depot Street, simplifying the materials. Dan, I think that was one of the things you had asked, earlier, that we look at the materials, simplify a little bit, and really kind of refine that down to kind of what the essentials were. And Walter, we can just kind of jump through these relatively quickly. And we'll just kind of walk through kind of the progression along Depot Street in the front of the building. Again, these will evolve slightly over time, but this is the direction of the design has taken and kind of where we're at. We'll jump through to DPW and a couple other updates, and then at the end we're live in the model, so I can kind of fly you through the site if there are any questions or if there are things people want to see. I think it's a little bit more dynamic to see it that way. So DPW, no major changes. We have tweaked some massing on DPW. What you see is on the left, kind of the administrative spaces, kind of in the middle, the shops for each different division. And then to the right, the repair bays for both DPW and fire. And all the way at the end, the wash bay. And in the back is the large vehicle storage area. These areas have mezzanines above them. So Walter, if you jump to the next one, you can see kind of the mezzanine plan above for storage of the majority of DPW's equipment, operations, stored materials, things like that. So again, no major changes, but we have tweaked the massing a little bit to try to address previous comments, make it a little more inviting. So we'll just jump over to that. And so we're on the road that connects the public safety building back to DPW. So we've tried to align that road to make the best ability for crossings at the wetlands. And then we've reacted to that with the building, placing a little bit of signage to kind of, ground you in the building, and opened up the corner at the entry a little bit. So if you jump to the next one, Walter, to really create a better sense of entry from the public parking there. Most of the other areas kind of behind this parking area will be fenced off, so public won't have access to there. But we'll see that in the fly through when we jump into it. We'll just jump to the next one, Walter, and just go through substation quickly. So no major changes at the substation. We have moved around a few things on the site just to make things work. Specifically, we've placed the radio tower now. So a small radio tower at this station, approximately 100 foot, which you'll see probably a little too big in the rendering, but we could jump to the rendering. Sorry, I think we'll jump to floor plans next. Again, tweaks in the floor plan, but nothing major, just kind of, tailoring it to the department's needs, making sure the flow works as they expect it to. One of the things that was working through is making sure we have enough lockers and bunker gear storage for the firefighters, given the new 2-station configuration and the way they are going to be staffed at multiple stations, particularly for coverage. We've been able to work through those items, get everything we need in. basically staying where we were at previously. And again, a small update on the materials, really trying to reflect what that station looked like in the watercolor. You can see that we've placed the tower, which is a little too wide right now. It's only about 3 foot by 3 foot, so it'll skinny up a bit, and really won't be noticeable there. Just jump through again, Walter. And you can see that tower. So you can see this is a very similar tower here. We, set it just off the building so that we can come through with an ice bridge for the wiring for that. And it's just set in a concrete foundation below grade. It'll be a lattice type tower, about 100 foot. There's some details on kind of exactly how this gets bought and funded and equipped. Essentially, the town owns the tower. SEMREC, which is the regional dispatch center, will provide the radio infrastructure for that tower. So, building provides everything to make it work. SEMREC provides the stuff that does the radio, communications. No major issues there, and we'll jump to the next slide, Walter.
I think the only thing to mention there, Greg, is we are meeting with Stonehill as they requested to really go over the aesthetics and exterior of the building to make sure that they're in agreement. And I think KBA has done a great job of highlighting a lot of the architecture at Stonehill so that they don't feel like they were left out of place. But we do have that meeting upcoming and scheduled. And they're very happy to meet with us. So key dates for the project before we go into really the building committee dates, but I think we mentioned detailed design drawings to the estimators, April 15th, another MBC meeting on April 23rd for those detailed design updates. We'll include some proprietary specification information and discussion with the group at that meeting. Detailed design reconciliation on the 13th. Meeting on May 14th with the MBC to review the estimates and the reconciled estimates. Meeting on May 29th to review the detailed scope and budget and potential value management. Just a graphic of the upcoming meetings for April and May. And that is everything we have on the PMA team end. And I will stop my screen share, Greg, so you can take it over for the fly through and any questions from the group.
Great, thanks, Walter.
And it looks like Nancy has a question.
Yep.
Yes, I do. At a recent ECAT meeting, cable television, they're concerned about the community room and it getting fitted, for ECAT capabilities. We didn't want you to forget about that. I don't know when it goes into this whole design thing, but it would be something because public meetings would be taking place in that community room, and ECAT wanted to be sure to have the necessary platform, I guess, in the community room that they can put their wires and fibers and whatever else they do in there. I don't know that much about it. I'm just on the committee.
Absolutely. We will definitely be in contact with them. I think probably right now, Greg, we are holding, I believe this came up during SD, and we were holding a budget number for connectivity for ECAT. But it's probably time to start getting them involved with your electrical engineer, correct?
Yeah, so this is now, Nancy, pretty much a everybody does it type of thing. So, we'll fine tune in on exactly what they're looking for. But the general scope that we would provide in the documents for infrastructure, for conduits and raceways, things like that, are now becoming pretty standard in what we do and will be there. So part of that EOC meeting is geared around public information and making sure that the departments are able to host public meetings and things like that, particularly in an event of emergency, if there is need for public broadcast and things like that, and that's part of that. I would say we would either invite ECAT to that meeting or a similar meeting in the same time frame to make sure we cover all of those things and incorporate them into the design. But going into the design development estimate, 99.9% of those things are going to be in there just as a matter of course, because things have changed in the last 10 years about public meetings hosting, even more so in the last 5 years. So that's really kind of the standard now, as opposed to 10 years ago. So I'll walk through on the public safety site. I won't jump over to the fire substation site just because it's in a different model and my computer will probably blow up if I try. But just to walk through, right, you've kind of seen some of the still images, but I'll start to zoom through. This is kind of just walking around. If it is a little laggy on your end, I apologize. It is a rather large model, so the video may not translate well. So we're live. This isn't a video. I can kind of run or walk wherever you guys want. If somebody gets seasick, let me know. I apologize again, but I'll try to drop down a little bit to kind of see the progression.
Greg, maybe it'd be helpful to talk materials that are being on the exterior.
Let me get down to
that was a question I was going to ask. Yeah.
So primarily, we're looking at brick for the majority of the volume of the building, with some panel, potentially wood grain or something like that on the front, and some metal panel kind of around the entry, but primarily kind of a brick building, masonry, which is currently much more affordable than metal panel, with metal panel used in specific areas for effect and prominence. So the majority of the building are kind of two brick types right now. Depending on budget, we may go to some larger masonry units if appropriate, but really we found that brick is very cost competitive right now, particularly in masonry, and we've had some pretty good luck with it. So again, a darker brick and one with a little bit more brown tones and red tones for effect. So you can see large two-story administrative areas. The apparatus bay in the center kind of sets back a little bit off the street, with the fire living quarters over here on the right. You will notice, compared to two dimensions, right, the site does drop quite a bit as you come across Depot Street. So the fire is kind of up high, which is nice because the parking happens kind of lower, so you don't have headlights in your windows when you're trying to sleep at night, which is good. As we come around the back of the building, kind of this is the kind of private lot for police and fire, training tower here, back of the apparatus bay and parking. As we go through this, I'll just jump over to the public parking side. So you can see from public parking, right, kind of the distance to the entry. So if that entry was around kind of the front of the building, how far it might be as you go around the front of the building to get there. So we won't go into the buildings yet because they're not quite ready for that, but we'll kind of circle back and go back toward DPW.
Greg, just a quick question. All that red is red brick. You can't see the detail.
Yep. Yeah, so that's red brick, exactly. Okay. Metal window or storefront or curtain wall, depending on exactly how big and size and all that fun stuff. And then a little bit of metal panel kind of put in for detail and scope. The The planting, it does seem like manicured lawn, but it will be a little shaggier, I'd say, because we are in environmentally sensitive area. So we're going to go with some ecological plantings, wetland mix, meadow mix in certain places, and wildflower mix. So it should be pretty nice and natural around the buildings. So I'm just going to speed up a little bit for time. So we come to the crossing, right? So 2 bridges will go across here. Again, sorry for jumping through, but just to speed us along here, you can see the crossing of the stream and back to the DPW. So again, framing the DPW, making the kind of back of the yard area a little bit hidden with the auxiliary building for public safety, the large mechanics area, the shops for individual departments, and then administration up in the front here. So you can kind of see this building here. For DPW, the materials aren't set yet, but likely some larger, concrete masonry units, so CMU block, split face, ground face, things like that toward the bottom. They're just a little bit more resilient for the work that goes on at DPW. And then the majority of the building is insulated metal panel, so different from the metal panel on the public safety building. But this is basically the entire building skin. It's the exterior, it's the interior finish, and it's the insulation kind of wrapped into one in the majority of the building. So I'll just walk around there. If there are any questions, comments, I'll kind of fly you through a little bit. You can see the salt storage shed to the left. In front of us is the fuel island for all of the town's fleet. On the end here is the wash bay. So that's the vehicle wash bay there. And off the end of the building is the knockdown pad. So when they have to knock down salts and sands off of dump bodies and things like that, that happens there on that outside stair. Again, storage for public safety there. So I know that's a kind of a lot to take in on a fly through, but any comments, questions?
Anyone? Any questions? I don't see any hands raised. We
So-
talked about those canopies. I just gonna throw out, Greg. Remember we talked about canopies? Are those in this yet or no, this model?
So for vehicle storage, so there is a small canopy for police included in the original project that's connected to the building. The police have requested that an alternate be added to cover some of their parking. I think there's 2 kind of approaches for that the committee should consider. The first is just a built canopy. And the second would be a solar canopy that would be part of the PPA. There are merits to both, I'd say. The PPA is nice because you don't necessarily have to pay for it. But that often requires kind of some comeback work to get that installed after the project's generally done. They are a little hard to coordinate, but there are factors that go into making sure that the PPA is viable. So it does take a little bit of time to coordinate. We have talked, at least generally, with the town's consultant about just PPA in general on these facilities. So that's in the discussion, but more to be had on exactly how that gets put out. If there is a preference, then we can certainly focus more on that.
And where would that be, Greg? Do you know which row? I'm just
Um,
trying to get the order.
Yeah, so it'd be
Back one?
back in this secured parking somewhere. And again, we'll twist and pull the parking slightly depending on how stormwater is starting to flow out with, the large basins, how things are panning out. So, it might look slightly different than this, but essentially it's about the same thing.
Greg, I think we're also carrying an ad alternate at the rear of
Oh, yeah.
the
Sorry, you're right.
DPW.
Yes. So originally we had an ad alternate, and I'll just zoom over here. This canopy here for the DPW is our ad alternate number 1. Sorry, there, and that's really to store outside
Seasonal
vehicles,
equipment.
seasonal
Yes.
equipment, things like that don't necessarily need interior space. If you remember at the study phase, right, we had kind of 2 numbers for DPW, one slightly smaller, which is what we went with, and one slightly bigger, which would get all of their fleet into undercover. This is kind of the middle ground, right, where there's covered area for materials that don't need to be necessarily indoors, that are more appropriate for maybe storage undercover instead of being out in the open. So that's the alternate as well. So, yeah, good point, Walter. Thank you for reminding me.
I had one quick question about out on Depot Street. Is there gonna be any traffic light infrastructure that gets added in front of the facility?
Yeah, so there is, and that was discussed with DPW, police, and fire. So there will be preemption lights there, including preemption lights for cross street to stop traffic at cross street and make sure that vehicles are stopped outside of the exclusion zone, which will essentially be the apron here, as well as this entry that aligns with cross street. So that is in there. Jason, it was in the original estimate, and Weston Sampson is also the consultant for traffic, so they're doing that work, and we'll tie it in. Same is true on Main Street. We didn't get that in the model yet, but we got the fuel island in. I thought we were doing good, but you're right, we haven't quite got there yet. So
Yeah, I was just curious. It's I come across Cross Street every day, and I wasn't sure. I figured there'd probably be something for the building. I wasn't sure if it was going to be, under emergency situations only, or if there would be a new traffic light where Cross Street intersects Depot, where there's an intersection there, and if that would be something that would be normally functioning throughout the course of the day, or if it was only under the emergency circumstances when our first responders are leaving the facility.
yeah, so typically only emergency responders. We're not adding really much meaningful vehicle traffic to Depot. Compared to the 20,000 or so trips a day that are on that street, our impact is fairly minor. So I wouldn't expect a true intersection light there. You would deal with queuing and a couple other things, I think. So it would really just be preemption to exclude those areas during emergency response.
Okay.
Is that smaller entrance, are the public entrance and the emergency entrances separate? Is that smaller one for the public?
So the public would come in here, basically circulate either into public parking for public safety or back to public works. On the east side of the building, so toward the power lines, that entry will have, just like you have now at public safety, kind of authorized vehicle only signage on it, so that the public doesn't come in. Because there is potentially second line emergency response out, Alicia, we don't put a gate there because we wouldn't want to, impede the ability for egress out of the fire apparatus typically if you had to come for a second line response out the back of the building. So the way these buildings work, right, is unlike your stations now, we go out both the front and the back. So primary response is out the front. Should there be an issue, an engine doesn't start, something like that happens where you can't get the frontline vehicles out. The second line vehicles are facing the other direction. They'll pull out the back and they'll loop around the fire quarters basically, and they'll come out that entrance. That's why that's included in the exclusion zone, and it's not just limited to necessarily the apparatus bay deck like many stations are. Then given the proximity for cross street, right, we want to make sure that people aren't turning right, running into a preemption light, missing it, and then getting into the excluded zone. So, a good question.
And Greg, a similar question with the DPW vehicle traffic, which one of those driveways are they using?
They could go either. I would guess that they would primarily come out the public entry in the most cases, right? They're coming in and out of there at fairly specific times a day. Different from what you have now, I guess, public parking is on the street now at public safety, right? That was one of the major reasons why the park, you didn't come through the parking area as you're egressing through the site. You want to make sure that the public parking is excluded from the normal traffic zone, just like a street would be, so that you don't kind of have those two functions intermixing there, given the kind of size of the trucks and things like that.
And how about police vehicles if there's additional responses from them? Same thing, would they go out
So
the other
that those would go out the other side, yes.
Andy, if I could, because I feel like no one likes to jump in on this level of design stuff. The schools know from going through Blanche James, the just like volume of design development meetings that have to be had across programming and mechanical systems and all those things. And so I've tried to sit in on as many of those as I can with each of the three departments, the different focus areas. And I've just been really pleased with KBA and Weston and Sampson's work. They've done a really good job working with the staff. They've done a lot of site visits to other communities with more modern facilities to see what they have put to practice in the real world and what kind of reflective of design intent and is working well 5 years on and what isn't, to inform the systems and what we're doing here. I just speaking personally, but I know both chiefs feel the same way, really appreciate the shift here on Depot Street with the public entrance coming around to where the parking is. It's more accessible. It reduces the travel time for people getting into the building, coming to the community room, trying to get into the facility. It highlights the community room right out front, which I really like, because that's an important feature of this building, because to Nancy's point, it will be used for public meetings. It'll give some life to what is a large building. And I really like that it'll also increase the amount of green space out front too. So I know internally the staff have been working on these design meetings for months now with the designers are pretty pleased with this direction. So thank you to the designers for all the work.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Greg.
Greg, these are great. I didn't know at some point, are we going to get these up on the website? I don't know, the stills or something, or is it too early? I mean, I know you probably can't do the bird's eye thing. You probably can't do the flyover, but
No, the flyover gets a little tricky, but yeah, I think we're at a point where obviously these presentations will be put up on the website. The images will be there. We can get some kind of prettier, fully rendered ones done for the kind of tagline on the website as well, if the committee desires that.
I think Andy and Greg probably will stay the course on updating the presentations, but maybe after design development, once any decisions are made, we can update the website with the updated graphics basically at the end of the completion of a phase, and kind of be able to have a time frame on when that should be, as opposed to in the middle of it if something changes or gets tweaked. A good time to do it would be at the end of that design phase.
yeah, that's what I was looking for. That sounds good.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely,
Lauren,
absolutely.
Yeah, Lauren, you had a question?
Sorry, I've been trying to figure out how to raise my hand. I couldn't figure it out. I have a question on the community room. Do we know at this time how many people that's going to hold approximately?
Approximately 60 to 65, somewhere in that range, depending on the setup, Lauren. So if you're at kind of presentation, right, tables and chairs, about 65.
And is there any space allowable with the wetlands for outdoor space?
As long as it's parking.
No, outside, like,
Yeah,
like
no, there really
outdoor.
isn't much now.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we're built out pretty much as we can build out. Apart from, a small entry here. Fire has a small outdoor patio for them to go outside, eat lunch or something like that. But even that is relatively small. Same thing with police, a small outside area, really small outside of the doors. But other than that, there really isn't a place for large exterior gatherings, unfortunately. Or in the summer, if there's no salt, maybe the salt shed, but probably not the most inviting.
And Greg, that's similar to Mansfield, right? Size-wise, or is this even bigger? Because I know we saw theirs and it was nice.
Sorry,
What do you mean,
what?
salt shed? Do you mean the salt shed?
No, I meant the community room.
Oh, the
Oh.
community room. So this is slightly bigger than Mansfield's. I think Mansfield's about 45 people. Mansfield has a number of other public meeting spaces that Easton lacks a little bit. So this is really Easton's way of getting some additional public meeting space, given that town hall is limited to what, Connor, maybe 20 people in the boardroom, something like that.
Yeah, so our largest boardroom in town hall is probably 20 people. So having this and having the hybrid technology built in will be really awesome for community functions, but it'll also be great to have this is also a training room as well, right? Because right now none of these facilities have the space, anything like this, where they can have the police or fire get together and do anything together.
Yeah, so a great point, Walter, right? So above 50 people, you can now host FBI and other trainings, which means, agencies from outside the town come in, a presenter from outside the town comes in, they're charged a fee to sit in those trainings. And by hosting the training, essentially you get free training for a couple of Easton seats for police or fire. So it's a good opportunity for something that can be used, training delivered and hosted there. A little bit of an added bonus. That also transforms into the Emergency Operations Center. So this really is playing triple duty, right? It's training either for the departments or outside training coming in, Emergency Operations Center, and community room. So it's playing kind of three different roles. Similar to what you see in Mansfield, similar to what you see in Foxborough. Those are all set up that way so that you can kind of function in a bunch of different scenarios.
Did you have a question, Lauren, again? I don't know if your hand was still up from last time or not.
I do. It's not really a question. And I know that we've exhausted this before. We talked about it the previous meeting, but I still don't think that there's enough parking spots. I think having a community room that's going to be that large, there's not as many parking spots to accommodate that.
Yeah, it's certainly a concern that we've tried to address. We have maximized as much as possible on-site parking. We'll continue to look at opportunities to do so as we fully size the stormwater retention areas. So as things get fully sized, we may be able to shrink some of those a little bit or change them to below grade storage. That's always a balancing act between where the existing water table is. We have to have a certain amount of separation if we go below grade. The cost of below grade ones, it's a little bit less expensive to do on grade storage. So we like to where we can. We can also grow some pretty plants in there. And balancing that with added parking. As we add parking, all of those other things kind of tend to increase. So it is a concern, Lauren, that we'll continue to review and see if there's any opportunity. But we are also at a 10-acre development limit here based on the way the site was purchased by the town. So we are kind of fixed in some of those areas. So noted, we think about it 3 or 4 times a day to see where we can move things and shift things, not only in amount of parking, but proximity to entry points and things like that. It's a continued effort for us to make sure that we get them in the right spot. We have connected the public safety and the DPW portions of the site with a sidewalk to make sure that even if you do have to do some overflow parking at Public Works, particularly for an event held in the community room, that you have a navigable way between those two. No, it's not short. I think we all recognize that, but at least there is a pathway back there so that if that is necessary, people could come and go from there.
In a safe pathway off the road.
I'm glad you made that point, Greg, because that's an important thing for us to keep an eye on as well, right? So if we're going to have a large community meeting, a public meeting, they are not always, but nearly exclusively are nights and weekends, during which time Public Works would not be there, right? And you would not have a lot of other public parking and traffic for folks coming into the public safety building for permits and things of that nature for a night meeting or things like that. So it would be great if the site had fewer constraints, but I think by having the pedestrian connectivity to DPW, which is admittedly a walk, even if you had a pretty packed meeting, I think collectively, there's some options there.
Can we just make sure that that walkway is very highly lit, brightly lit? Because it's a long walk, long, narrow, dark walk.
And I would say, Lauren, for reference, right, the parking here is similar to the parking outside of Foxborough's community room inside in terms of parking counts. That room is close to this size. I think they're at about 60 in that room. So they tend to do pretty well. The times where it does fill up are usually public safety related trainings because officers are coming from all over the state, and the trainer, so the person hosting the place, the company putting on that event tries to maximize attendees as much as possible. Makes sense. So those tend to be the only times they're full. Our office is about 100 yards from there, so we have about a 10-year, 12-year running test next door that we're able to track pretty quickly. I will note that the other thing that's changed a little bit over the course of time is that the public interaction with public safety departments has become more virtual, particularly around records requests, things like that are primarily done virtually now. Same thing with fire department plan review, things like that. Those are done virtually now, and people aren't bringing paper plans to fire anymore. That's all handled through an online process. So those daily interactions are cut down quite a bit, I think, which will kind of help with the parking situation.
All righty. Any other questions, concerns, comments, or? All right, seeing none. Well, that was great, Greg. That's impressive. It was nice to see that. And so it would be like Walter said, maybe when we wrap up this phase, we can throw some of those up on the website, start to point people, because I'm sure people are going to want to, start to kind of see these type of renderings.
Absolutely.
All right.
No, thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. So that was it for the agenda. Any new business? I don't have any. Anyone else have any new business for the committee? All right. Seeing none. All right. I think we're ready to adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn? From someone?
So move, DeLuca.
Luca. All right. And do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
I don't know who we're gonna do it. I'll give it to was that Lauren? All right, Lauren, we'll give it to you. How's that? All right, we'll roll call vote. I know Jamie had to jump off because he had another meeting, so I know he had to jump off. So I am good. Jamie's had to leave. Lauren?
Yes. How do I answer? Yes.
Yes, that's good enough.
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Nancy? All right, and Jason?
Yes.
Did I miss everyone, or I got everyone, right? All right, well, thank you for everyone's time tonight. That was great, and as Walter alluded to, the next meeting is April 23rd. Let me know if that's a problem for you. I'll shoot something out the week before, and we'll get you the meeting minutes ahead of time. We'll go from there. So have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. You
Thanks.
too.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Right.